What's going on, guys? My name is Matt, and because of a few parts that have come in recently, I decided to throw together a seriously compact Ryzen 3 gaming PC. The system comes in at right around 7 liters in volume and can easily fit in a laptop bag. I decided to make this system to show a good option for those of you who want the portability of a console with the added benefits a PC brings. Because I used a lot of parts that I had on hand, not all of these components are offering the best value for the money, but when I go over these, I'll give recommendations on alternatives that I believe are good value for the money. In terms of cost, this PC with a few modifications should cost around the same price as an Xbox One X. So let's start by going over all the parts in the system. At the heart of this PC is the Ryzen 3 1200. Even with the recent release of Intel Coffee Lake, the lack of budget Coffee Lake motherboards means Ryzen 3 is still the king of the budget CPU category. With 4 cores and an unlocked multiplier, the R3 1200 can give some really killer performance when overclocked. Even with a mild overclock of 3.8 GHz, I was really impressed with the amount of performance this CPU was able to put out, and I'll be doing a more conventional bang for the buck build featuring the CPU in the near future. For the motherboard, I went with what is in my opinion the best ITX AM4 motherboard on the market, the ASRock AB350 Gaming ITX/AC. This board offers all the features you could want with a good layout and reasonable price. Though there are X370 boards available, the lack of physical PCIe slots on ITX boards means unless you're doing bifurcation to run multiple GPUs, the X370 chipset has no obvious benefits over the B350 chipset on the ITX format. This board features built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, plenty of fan headers, and other nice items like an M.2 slot, which is a big plus for ITX builds. Cooling the CPU is just the stock AMD Wraithspire cooler, which even with the 1200 overclocked, it stayed relatively cool and quiet even under an intense load. For RAM, I used a 16GB kit of 3000 MHz G-Skill RAM, which was what I had on hand, though if you're wanting to build something similar, I would recommend going with a 2x4GB kit of 2666 MHz RAM, as RAM prices are ridiculous right now, and all you really need is 8GB of RAM if all you're doing is gaming. With that being said, dual channel memory is a must and speed does matter, but going for something like 2666 MHz will give you great performance without the extra cost of stepping up to 3000 or 3200 MHz RAM. I'll leave links to a couple RAM kits that are a good value in the description down below. For the GPU, because I was making this a compact build, I went with an MSI GTX 1050 low profile card. Though MSI does offer a 1050 Ti low profile GPU, the 1050 was a better value at the time of purchasing. The combination of the R3 1200 and the GTX 1050 gives a great gaming experience at 1080p 60 FPS in most games. Something to note is that if you prefer AMD or have a FreeSync monitor, another good option would be a low profile RX 460, which is similarly priced. Overall, the low-profile 1050 is compact, power efficient, and performs really well in most any game you throw at it. For storage, I think your best bet is to go with an M.2 SSD, as they don't cost much more than their 2.5-inch counterparts, and they eliminate the need for having to route SATA power and SATA data cables. I used an NVMe M.2 SSD I had on hand from OCZ, but there are some good SATA M.2 drives like this WD Green, which provides a good amount of value for the money. Keep in mind you can always add additional storage in the future in the form of 2.5-inch drives in this system if you want. For the power supply, I use this 300 watt SFX unit from a company called FSP. It's a very inexpensive power supply when compared to other SFX units, and it's 80+ certified. 300 watts may not seem like much, but even overclocked, the system doesn't use anywhere near the 300 watts this unit is rated to supply. The only really downside of this PSU is the cheap look and loud exhaust fan. And for those of you that have never heard of FSP, they actually are an OEM and make power supplies for a lot of reputable brands like EVGA. Finally, the case that's holding this entire system is the Silverstone ML09. At 7 liters, this case is extremely space efficient and very affordable at around $60. Though half-height GPUs and SFX PSUs are required, the only other 7-liter case I know of is the Dan Case A4, which is 3 or 4 times as expensive as the ML09. Building this PC was overall pretty easy, but as with with any small form factor build, you have to pay more attention as to the order in which you install components and plug in connectors. The only real issues I ran into was needing to remove the drive cage to fit the PSU, and the GTX 1050 had to be pressed up against the front panel I/O to make it fit, but other than that, everything went smoothly. It booted up first try and only took a few minutes to dial in a decent overclock. In terms of performance, this is going to perform like any other system with a Ryzen 3 1200 and GTX 1050, so I decided to test 3 of the games I'm playing the most right now, which are PUBG, Overwatch, and Fortnite Battle Royale. The first game I tested was PUBG, which is notorious for being poorly optimized and difficult to run. With that being said, the system had no problem running it at 1080p, low settings with an average of 62 FPS and 1% lows of 49 FPS. Overall, this was a really smooth and enjoyable experience, and I was happy to see the system was able to push a 60 FPS average. Moving on to Overwatch, which is a good representative for a difficult to run esports game. At 1080p high settings, the system pumped out 101 FPS average and had 1% lows of 88 FPS. Finally, the last game I tested is Fortnite Battle Royale, a game which if you haven't heard of, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's like PUBG, but free, easier to run, and adds the element of crafting structures. Oh, and everything's destructible. At 1080p medium settings, the system averaged 74 FPS and had 1% lows of 61 FPS. This was a really great experience, but still doesn't help the fact that I'm terrible at this game. So yeah, as you can see, this PC performs really well. Overclocking the CPU further and upgrading to a 1050 Ti could yield you even more performance. Overall, the system's compact, relatively affordable, and performs pretty well. Links to all the parts used will be in the description down below. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. So yeah guys, I think this wraps this video up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up, as well as consider subscribing for future videos. And as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.